the plan for this watercolor session, 3-week session, is this week we're going to practice the tree with the twigs and with the leaves. And next week we will definitely focus on practicing the tree with the limbs with no leaves on, because there's an art to it too. And then what we're going to do is we're going to put this all together and add light, so that we can, we will have to worry about the limbs and we'll have to worry about the leaves, and also putting light on those leaves. So,
Claire,
yes.
are we sketching today?
Oh, yes, that's something different that I've decided to do for this session. Today we will be painting. But I will give you time to gather your supplies for painting today when it's time.
Okay.
But I'm going to start by showing you a few paintings of great artists who have painted trees, to show you the different ways that it could be done. And these are not the only ways, but I thought that it would be inspiring to start with that. All right, so I'm going to share my screen now and show you how trees, they are majestic yet challenging to paint. So in this little slideshow, I've decided to gather together some of the paintings that inspire me, the artists who inspire me. And particularly, I tried to select paintings that were painted in ways that are different from one another. So in this case, we have 2 snow scenes. In each snow scene, we can see some trees, not that many. On the one on the left by Aaron Shore, you can see that he painted the trees with very warm tone, almost like an orange color. He stayed away from painting each leaf. They're just like groupings of of leaves with maybe a little bit of a tree trunk indicated. And the one on the right, David Lucier, I took classes with him, and he decided to use more of a cooler tone against the blue sky to paint the trees. And these trees, they don't really have they don't have leaves during the winter, but he just grouped together all the little twigs that they are and just indicate them as masses. So these are done with oil, but I do have examples with watercolor as well. So in this example here, oops, no, that's not a good idea. Doesn't work. Okay. In this example here, if you look at the trees that are on this painting, they're just like they've been scumbled on almost. Like they're just a mass of very dark green, and in some areas a little lighter, with here and there a few sky holes. But definitely we do not see any specific leaves here. So we don't have to indicate each leaf separately when painting trees, except if you're a pointillist. Of course, pointillist school was a school where they did all the brush strokes were all little dabs. I don't have an example of that here, but this is a painting by Laurel Danielle. Now the next one is a pastel, and in this case, you can tell the light sources behind the trees, and that's why these trees here are lit and they have some light on them, some orangey and red-orange color, whereas the part that is in the shadow, see, it's got some blue even in the tree. It's very obvious here. And in the deepest areas of the shadow, it's like a very deep purple over here. And then to indicate that this one here is behind this tree here is behind the one in the front, it's more of a grayish purple that the artist used. But even in this painting, you cannot really see the leaves. Just on the fringe of the edge of the tree, you can see a little bit of a um, broken pattern that indicates that it doesn't all end exactly in the same spot. Now in this one, move this. So on the right-hand side, we have a painting by Tim Oliver, and this is a watercolor painting. And the sun comes from, it probably comes from sideways and maybe a little bit from behind, and that's why all the trees and in their leaves, it's all very dark except here at the top. But even in watercolor, I mean, maybe on the edge there, he did a little dabbing to indicate a few leaves, but the trees are painted as masses, plus the tree trunks and some of the branches. And the one on the left is a pastel, and this one's by Christine Bodnar, sorry. And the light comes from behind. That's why it's like they're almost like black, and it's a profile. This tree almost looks like it's a person. It's like it has a character because it's so prominent. So it's the subject matter of the painting basically, and you can tell that the limbs are indicated, and even the leaves they're not very clearly indicated, and that's because the way of the light and the pattern that it creates when the light comes through the tree, the leaves from behind it. And this one, called Peace on the River by Susan Lin, is a watercolor painting. And in this painting, especially for all of the trees except the one in the very front, I can't really tell specific leaves, and the trees are indicated with different shades of green, and the one in the very background is almost like it's a very pale green, and it has some lilac and some blue in this to indicate it's even further away. And the one in the front here is the one that almost has life, and that's where we can see a few of the leaves here. But even this area here is the leaves are touching, and they're not individually painted necessarily. And the tree trunk has a very grand shape, which I really like. Now this one I think we've seen before in other classes. So in this case, it's very clear that we can see the tree line. See at the top here, the line goes down, and this is like the tree line, because these trees that are to the very right are they are closer to the viewer, and as the trees are further away from the viewer, they become smaller and a little lighter and grayer, but not that much. And so in this case, the trees are evergreens, and so that's why they're green even during the winter. But even for an evergreen, you don't necessarily have to paint each individual branch. It's more like a grouping, a mass of certain colors, and with some accents of light and shadows. And maybe the tree that's the closest, like this one, will have a little bit more detail. But that's it. And I mean, as we see it, we can tell that these are evergreens. The human eye, is the one that does all of the work. So the eye of the viewer is the one that does a lot of work. And in this one here, this is a watercolor. It's beautifully done by Ken Hobson. In this case, you can tell that there's a grouping of warm trees here in the background behind, these bare trees in the front. But nowhere can you tell that there are any specific leaves painted. The tree branches here in the front are beautifully done, and that requires a lot of skill to be able to do this with watercolor. And then the one on the left here, look at this. Nice grays, just barely darker than the sky, sufficient for the human eye to recognize this is another tree that comes from the left. And look at this here, like this little splotch of color here. It's grays. So you can tell these are very far away trees that are growing even behind these orange ones. Different ways of painting watercolor. So this one here, it's called Winter Patterns by Kathleen Dunphy. It's a small little 6x8 in oil. And in this case, she painted the evergreen during the winter. And she painted them with very few brush strokes. Like even this tree here, you can tell there's like this little triangle of shadowy area, and then this other area that is lit. And then she added a little bit more detail, but basically when looking at a tree, when you start painting it, you want to look at the mass. So in the case of the bigger one, there's almost like three wedge. So there's the wedge that's on the very left, like this. And then there is the one in the middle, like almost like this, that has the mid-tone. And on the very right, this area here has a little bit more warmth to it. But it's very simply painted, and yet we recognize it very easily as an evergreen. This is one of my favorite ones. I love these colors. This is by Shula Buragar. I love the way that she paints mid-morning, mid-valley morning. And look at this. Maybe we can count one leaf here and another smaller grouping. Maybe there's another leaf here, but it's a mass of this bright orange against this other area here, which is in the shadow. So this could be painted as orange with a little bit of blue, gives nice rich brown. And voila, the tree comes alive. And then the one on the very left here, same thing. So there's the lit side, nice lime green. And then there is the shadowy side. And in the lime green, she might have put a little bit of magenta and a little bit more blue. But the trees were painted as masses. I think this, and then the grand one, Age to Perfection. This is a 500-year-old tree in Texas. Isn't that magnificent? So in this one, the painter put a lot of detail in the tree trunk, the way that the tree trunk was painted, in the tree branches that were indicated, and also in the leaves. But even then, can you count the leaves? I can't. So using color and patterns and shapes and forms, this person was able to represent this beautiful tree that was aged to perfection. So trees, majestic yet challenging to paint. So this one is a little painting that you might have seen in my studio for those who came to my studio. It's right here in Dracut where I live. It's a little tree that I painted during the spring of 2020. Yep, this was my first time I went outside during the pandemic. So there are concepts to consider when painting the trees. Consider the whole tree as a mass when you initiate your painting and when you're observing the tree before painting it. Only a few leaves are sufficient. Stay away from painting each leaf. I know I should have said each leaf, sorry about this typo. And then closer trees are bigger and have more details than the trees in the distance. That's also very important to remember as a concept. Is there any questions about this presentation? Okay, so I wanted to also show you some of the shape of the trees that can be observed. And this I got from a book at the library, but I thought it was very interesting. And I think I showed them to a few of you last week, but anyway, or the week before. So this one is called Flowering Dogwood. And what I like about this is it shows the tree limbs on the right-hand side, how they grow. And then it shows the tree limbs with the leaves on them. And if you observe here on the left with the leaves on the tree limbs, you can almost tell each individual branch, even if the leaves are on them. And that's because of the pattern of the mini branches at the end, the twigs, how they grow. And that's why when the leaves cover them, you can still see each branch individually. Now, if we look at a different type of tree, this one, the river birch. So in this case, the main branches that grow off the tree trunk, they basically grow upward. And then the branch that branches off from this main branch, they grow sideways. And they create a lot of ramifications on the end, which is why when the leaves cover the branches, you can't really see each branch separately. It's like a big mama branch here and one other one here on the top. So understanding how the tree limbs and how their branches, how they grow before you cover them with leaves is a very good idea. And that helps you paint the leaves on the tree. I have a few more examples, and these ones only have a profile. This is a white oak. And by looking at this profile of the tree with the leaves on, you can tell that, you know, it creates almost like a dome or like a round dome, the overall structure of the tree with the leaves with lots of sky holes. And the leaves, they grow quite close to the tree trunk. And if we look at this tree without the leaves, that's the white oak without the leaves, you can see how the branches also grow upwards and there are ramifications, but all the ending, they're almost all, they almost create the dome size of the tree. And that's why when the leaves are on it, it creates a dome. Now the American elm also create a dome, but doesn't have leaves that comes down very low. It's just all at the top. It's like a canopy. And the tree limbs, they start branching off of the main trunk a lot higher than in the previous one. And then if you look at it, you know, without the leaves, it's all upward and all very high. Like there's like half the tree doesn't have any branch that branches off. And this is my favorite one, the sugar maple, because I really like maple syrup and maple sugar. And we even have maple butter. I don't know if you've ever had that. Oh, so good. Anyway, so this maple sugar with the leaves on it, it almost has like a shape, the shape of a pear. And so it comes down on either side and then it wraps like around towards the bottom here. And so when painting a maple tree, you want to make sure that you have the leaves come all the way to cover the tree trunk, although it gives a chance for a few of the sky holes to show through. And if we look at it without the leaves, you can tell that the tree trunk is the one big main line that we see in the trees in this tree. And the branches that branch off from the tree trunk, they do grow upward, but none of them are very large or very big. They're most of them are just little twigs that branch off from the tree trunk. So that's probably the reason why the leaves grow and they cover the tree trunk, and so it grows everywhere. So the sugar maple is the one that I selected for us to paint. So we're going to have some fun with that. And so therefore, I thought I'd show you a little quick demo of painting the tree that I've pre-recorded. I'm painting it with purple that I made with orange and blue. I mean blue and red. So ultramarine blue and alizarin crimson that I pre-mixed before starting. I'm taking a small brush, but any brush that has a small tip will work. And first I painted the tree trunk, and then I added all the limbs. Once I've done that, that's when I add the leaves. And I save some of the sky holes. And this way, I know that the tree branches that are showing in the sky holes are good. I'll play it again. Now, one thing that I can tell you is when you're painting this, you don't have to have your hand and your arm in the air. You can put your hand and your arm down, and that will be a little easier to paint all these little branches like this. So then I take a slightly larger brush, also round, to paint the leaves on top. Voila. And then you can see my arm. But I also recorded a demonstration of the bear tree being painted. Oops, here it is. And basically it's a similar thing to the other one, but we just don't paint on top of it. And the key here is to have all of the branch end pretty much the same distance from the tree trunk. So this is it. All right, enough with that. Now, so what we're going to do is we're going to paint a background. So you can see here behind these two trees, these are two examples. So first we are going to paint a graded wash of a light blue like this. And at the bottom, we can add a little bit of green. So, and then with this, once this is dry, after that, we'll paint the tree on top. So the tree's painted wet on dry, but the background we will do a wet on wet by painting a graded wash. So I'm going to demonstrate, and if you feel like you are good to go and you want to go ahead and do this, you can. So I'm going to do a graded wash, a blue graded wash on the whole thing, going from a little darker at the top to very light at the bottom. And then at the bottom, I will add a little bit of green just to make like it's a little bit of grass at the bottom. And here on this example, I went with a little bit of orange. Why not? So that's what we're going to do. So to do a graded wash, you can use a large brush. I like to use my large flat, but you can use like a filbert like this. That's good. Try to use the biggest brush you have. If you have a mop like this, you should try and use your mop for a graded wash. That's a good tool to do this. To do a graded wash, always prepare your color first. So the color will simply be blue. I like to use ultramarine blue because that's the color I tell you to buy. If you want to use some other blue that you have, cerulean blue is a very nice blue color for the sky. Some like to use cobalt blue. That's also a nice blue for the sky. And if you want to go wild and be creative and want to do like a sunset color for your sky, then by all means paint like a pink sky with a little bit of purple in it, or maybe a very very yellowish kind of sky towards purple, or yellow towards orange, towards red or blue. So you can have some fun with this. I will simply do a graded wash with my blue. And if you're not super used to painting with watercolor, then doing a simple graded wash with your blue is a good practice, and it's a good way to feel successful once you've done it. So I'm just re-wetting this blue that I had used yesterday when I was preparing the class. And I want to have a lot of blue because we're going to use this blue for the graded wash, and we're also going to use it to make purple. So at this time, I'm just preparing my blue, and it's almost ready now. And once it's ready, then to start with my graded wash, I will first wet my paper. Then after that, I will add color. So my blue is ready. And now I'm going to use my brush to completely wet my paper. So the great thing with this big brush is that it covers quickly. So I'm just checking to make sure that this is all sufficiently wet. I want to make sure it's really wet for a graded wash, because for this graded wash, we want the sky to be light in color, not too dark. So the more water will allow for a lighter blue. So here now I'm using my blue, and I'm just going here and I'm putting it in the water a little bit more there. And I'm going to do my graded wash, starting with rather light color and coming down. Oops, no, it's not wet enough. So now I put it in the water just so it goes a little lighter all the way to the bottom. More water. So I didn't put it back in the pigment for the whole thing. And now I'm going to let this dry, but I can also add my green at the bottom, even if the edge between the sky and the land is not very sharp. That's okay. So I have some green here in this little, it doesn't need a whole lot. So I'm just going to go like this, the width of my brush, just to indicate a slightly different color. Maybe a little bit more. Voila. So I just barely indicated that I have another color there. Maybe it could be a little bit more intense. So I'm going to add a little bit more of blue to this green. There, this will be a little bit better. So I'm gonna use this color now and go over this grass one more time. Starting this way this time. Just to indicate that I have the ground. There. So our next step, well, this is drying. So this is where I have, oops, this is where I have my graded wash. Now, while this is drying, we're going to do some practice here. This is your chance to try different brushes and attempt to do those nice little very thin twigs. So I have prepared a nice deep purple, mixing my alizarin crimson and ultramarine blue. Now, if you can use purple, if you prefer to do this practice, you can use blue, you can use orange, as long as you try to use a very deep color. And when we paint the limbs and when we paint the tree, I will suggest that we use the purple because it's almost like black. It's a nice deep color. If you have purple that comes out of the tube, you can use that, but you don't have to have that. So now is your chance to try your different brushes and see which you prefer to do your twigs. So you can go with a very small little brush like this. So this is a very small little brush, a round brush to do the twigs. You could use one that's slightly larger as long as it has a nice, very thin tip on the end. You could also use a filbert like this one. It's got a very fine tip on the end once it's wet. So if I wet it, it goes to a very fine tip. So I can do the little twigs with this one. You could also try a flat brush. So this one's a small one. And you could try a flat brush and use it sideways to do the twigs. So anyway, this is your playground. You have one on your paper. And this is where we're going to paint the tree. So for now, we're going to play here. So trying to see how much paint. So practice and try to see how much paint do you need on this brush to make some nice fine twigs. And so do you need to put your your hand down on your paper, or do you want to hold it up to make little twigs? See, you can make the little twigs. You can make this the other way. Oh, they're bigger the other way. Now, if I put my brush down, my hand down, I can have a little bit more control over what I do when I do the twigs. I can do them sideways. Now it's getting to a point where I have less and less paint. Oops, less and less paint up here. So I can always put and go back and add more paint on my brush. So let's say I put a lot of paint on my brush. Then what happens? What will happen if I put a lot of paint on my brush? It will be very, very dark to go, very, very difficult to go very thin, because the paint tends to want to go on the paper. So the more you practice this, the better you get at it. Now, I've used my very fine little brush. Now I'm going to show you how I can also use my bigger brush, like this one, for example, to do something similar. So this one has a very fine point on the tip. So using this, I can also do some pretty fine branches. Now, it's important that it's wet enough. It's got enough enough paint on it. But you can, even with a big brush, do something that's rather fine. So you can see here, I was able to do it also with my bigger brush. And then, I'm going to show you with the flat brush that it's also possible to do it with a flat brush. The important thing here is that you try to decide for yourself what you like best. So the flat brush, I would use it sideways. And so I can do pretty fine twigs also with the flat brush. I kind of like this actually. That's what I'm used to. So see how I can do the twigs also. And this is in the, this is our practicing ground. So we're gonna have some fun here and practice your twigs. You can do small ones. You know, you can make them smaller or longer. You know, think of a twig, it's gonna go in all sorts of direction. So this is your chance to try your brush and decide for yourself which you prefer to do the twigs with. So I'm going to give you a good, probably a good like 5 or 10 minutes to practice this, because practice makes perfect. And if you run out of space, you can always get another piece of paper and practice some more. Is there any questions on this? Okay, so I'm going to share the image from which we are to paint. Excuse me. That might help. So this is what it looks like. Okay. And now you, let's see, it's 2:15 right now. So I'll give you at least 15 minutes, probably a little bit more, to paint this. Take your time and remember to breathe. So one thing that I haven't talked about is a paintbrush called the Rigger. And I have it upstairs, so I'm going to go and get it because I want to show you this the specific paintbrush. And I will also go to the ladies' room. So I'm back, and I will talk to you a little bit about this specific paintbrush. It's called a Rigger, and the name of this brush comes from the fact that painters use it um, to paint the rigging on boats. Those are all the ropes, the different ropes that exist on boats. And to paint those ropes, you have to have a very thin paintbrush that can hold a lot of paint, because when you have a long rope, you want to make sure that you can paint the whole thing in one go. So those paintbrushes were created, are used for that reason, and that's why it's called like that. I don't know when they were created though. Anyway, I have one example of it, and I will show it to you once I resume my demonstration. But for right now, since you're doing great, I'm sure, at painting what you are painting, I'm going to let you continue. And if you have any questions, let me know. So Kevin, how are you doing with your tree?
I'm having a lot of fun,
Are you
and I
doing
appreciate you reminding me to breathe.
Ah, yes. Are you doing the tree in front of you?
Actually, I'm working on a tree that I created before, and I have essentially 4 copies of it, and attempting to use different materials.
Ah, I'm looking forward to see that. So I don't know if you guys have, any of you guys are on Facebook, but if you, I think I've talked about that. If you are on Facebook and would like to join my private group where students can share, and only those who are invited in the group can see and comment on the postings. The first step is to friend me on Facebook and let me know if you want to be invited to the group. I'd be happy to do that.
I just want to let you know that I'm not on Facebook.
Okay.
When the weather gets nicer and I can have my niece or friend come over to the back porch and they help me sign up to Facebook, then I would be interested in participating. But
Okay.
I've heard it's kind of complex if you're not familiar with it. And you have to, about setting your safety, standards.
Yeah,
Um,
they have made it very complex.
So that's, otherwise I just have to wait until it gets warmer out.
Yeah,
So but in the future, I will be. Because I was on Facebook some years back when I was still working, but I had some problems with some people I worked with that, they were like pushing to become my friends. And then I didn't want them to be my friends. And there was a whole big complications at work. And so I just said, I'm not on Facebook, and, and I left it, unfortunately, but, what can you say? There's
well,
great people in this world.
it's very interesting because lately, a lot of guys have been sending me Facebook requests to be friend with them. And I look at their profile, and they just recently created a profile on Facebook, and many of them are military men. And I'm thinking, what are you guys doing?
Oh, God.
So I just don't accept their friendship. But I mean, I have accepted one by mistake because I saw that one of my other friend that I trust was friends with him. So I thought, okay, I guess, he's into art because she's an artist friend. And now he is sending me messages and calling me on Messenger. And I'm not responding to his messages or his phone calls.
Mhm.
But I'm thinking, what the hell are you doing? And so I will probably unfriend him.
Because I know a few people I've talked to that said, yeah, sometimes you can get people can become very strange.
Yeah.
So,
But yeah, I'm on Facebook to display my artwork. That's the reason that I'm on Facebook. And I don't do family stuff or,
right.
private stuff of any kind. On Facebook, I just display my artwork and like to look at other people's artwork.
Mhm. But when I do get on Facebook, I will let you know. And then,
Yeah. Yeah, there's no obligation.
oh no, but I am interested because I notice now, even like,
So a rigger is a brush that has a very long, it's got a very long brush bristle. So it's almost like a foot, no, an inch long. If you look here, see compared to my finger, it's this way. Whoa, you can't see. You can see it goes from here and it's this much. So compared to another one of my brushes, it's even longer. So then you can't really see very well, but if I go like this, you might be able to see. So you can see here that this one's a lot longer. So this here is the rigger, this one, and this is the regular brush. So the rigger is a lot longer and it's very, very thin. It's a brush that can gather a lot of paint and a lot of water in one go. So let's say I put it in my purple here. So now that I've put it in my purple, I'll show you how it can make a very thin, long line. So if I go from here, it can make a very thin, long line, and it's still going strong even at this end of the paper. So if I go like this, it can make a very thin line too. So it's kind of a nice brush to have to make these little tree limbs. See, it would make a very, oops, sorry, very thin branch like this. But this is a very expensive brush. When I went to buy one, that's what I realized. So now we're going to move on to the next step, which is that we're going to now, on our on our tree that we just painted, we're going to cover it with leaves like this. Or this is another example that I did. And the sky holes are saved. So you have to paint around those sky holes. Now, if you're a little unsure about the sky holes, one way to do this is you could draw them with a pencil lightly and then paint around them. But for the sake of the demonstration, I will simply look at my example there and do them. So now to do this, you can use a brush that's a round brush. That's what I like to use, about this size. You can also use a smaller one like this, but or you can use, the bigger one like this. That's like a filbert. They're all good. So I'm going to use with my Singer Sargent because I feel like I can paint like Singer Sargent with it. So my paint has dried up a little bit. I'm going to wet it. So I'm still using the same color that I used to paint my original tree. And use this color has got to have a lot of pigment in it in order to cover. So I just go like this. Well, I'm trying to make sure that you can see that I'm not hiding the camera. So just like this. And then the edge will not be all even. There will be some areas where I have sky holes. And I just keep going. So even if your branches were still wet, that would be okay, acceptable. And having painted the limbs before is a good idea, because now your limbs are showing where they're supposed to. And when I give you a chance to do this, then you'll have a chance to look at the example that I got from the library, the book. So you can do the same as that. But I'm just simply looking at the examples that I have here. I've painted in the past in preparation for this class. Running out of purple, but I still have the red and the blue, so I'm making it. So remember, your tree is supposed to look like a pear shape, kind of.
Mm.
And so you want to respect that overall shape. And you can, if your pre-branches are light in color, you can go over them one more time, but try not to make them bigger than they were. Over here, I have one over here. So it gives you something like this. And it's the overall shape of the tree limbs. Maybe it goes a little bit more this way. So the overall shape is like a pear shape. And now is your chance to do your own.